Good evening. I'm Dr. Rena Goldin, and tonight I'm going to be speaking to you about the key to successfully modeling healthy communication skills to your children by learning how to respectfully communicate with your spouse. I want to begin by sharing two stories with you that demonstrate how different styles of marital communication can affect your children, sometimes in ways that are unexpected. The first is a story about Chaim. Chaim is a young man from a dysfunctional home with parents whose style of communication most often was screaming, yelling, throwing objects, slamming doors. Rarely was there a conversation in which his parents came out hearing each other's opinions and their sides and ended calmly. There was almost never an apology. One Shabbos, Chaim decided he was going to go to his sister and brother-in-law. And this couple had been married approximately 10 years when this Shabbos happened. And they had what, as a couples therapist, I would consider a very successful and healthy marriage with great communication skills. The way they got there was through a lot of hard work. So Chaim was sitting at the table Friday night, and the conversation was very nice, and a little bit into it, the conversation became tense. His sister and brother-in-law started arguing. First they started disagreeing, then they started arguing, and then their voices even got loud. They were both very passionate when they disagreed on the topic. Chaim got really nervous. He felt the tension. He didn't really want to be there. He wished he could have crawled under the table. And then he started hearing a difference. He started hearing the couple stop yelling, start listening to others' points of view, listening to what the other was saying, and he even heard something that almost shocked him. At the end of the argument, he heard his sister apologize. So the Shabbos meal went on, and a few moments later, his sister looked over at him and said, "Chaim, are you okay? You look very anxious. You look very worried." And he said to her, "Actually, I was. I thought that Shabbos was ruined. I thought that was it. You know, Mommy and Tati, they ever got into a discussion like this, the rest of Shabbos we would all be trying to stay in our rooms. We wouldn't enjoy Shabbos meals." And he had never seen a disagreement end with an apology. There had been so much marital discord with Chaim's parents when they were growing up that they had never had time to think about the impact it was having on the children. Now, this young man would struggle with how and where to learn healthy ways to communicate. The second story I want to share with you is quite different. This is a story about Monsey. Monsey came from a home with very open communication. In most ways, her parents were wonderful role models. Monsey had been married a short time and separated from her spouse. She was sitting with her mother. Her mother was talking with her and said, "Monsey, I don't understand. Why didn't you ever come to Tati and I before, when you were just beginning to have difficulties, and talk to us? We could have helped you." Monsey said, "I was embarrassed." And her mother looked at her, "What? You were embarrassed? What were you embarrassed about?" She said, "Mommy, I never saw you and Tati fight. I never saw you yell at each other. I never even saw you have differences of opinion." Her mother thought that was ironic because before the children were born, they had decided that even little disagreements they were going to have in private. They were never going to show their children any discord because they wanted to show them give them the best chance to have a healthy, open communication in their marriage. The problem with that is that inadvertently, in the end, this contributed to their own daughter's separation by her not knowing that it was okay to have disagreements in the marriage. We all have ideas of how we would like our children to communicate with us, with their friends, with their siblings, and of course with their teachers and Rebbeim. This all begins with the example they see at home of their parents communicating with each other. Healthy, open, marital communication begins with respect, friendship, and fondness and admiration for one's spouse. Okay, I want to start with discussing respectful communication. before I give you my definition of respectful communication, so that we're all on the same page as I'm speaking this evening, I want to tell you that a lot of my couples work, as well as a large part of this presentation, comes from the research of Dr. John Gottman. Some of you may know of his most popular book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. So let's begin with respectful communication. Respectful communication. Keeping each other's best interests at heart. Being able to say to yourself, I'm trying to keep my husband's best interest at heart, and I'm assuming that he is doing the same for me. The second thing to respectful communication, and I'm speaking about it with spouses, but you should all keep in mind that this evening is about children, so it then goes into how you're able to communicate with your children. The second piece is listening to each other, even when you have differences of opinion. That can sometimes be difficult, but it's really important. Dr. Gottman speaks about building blocks to marital satisfaction, and I want to address 3 of them with you this evening. Friendship, fondness and admiration, and something titled the emotional bank account. Friendship is created by knowing your spouse. It's by knowing your spouse's likes and dislikes. It's by knowing friends and enemies. Maybe knowing that your husband's best friend when he was in the theater was Yankee. Best and worst memories, fears and hopes. All of these things, the more we know, the better we know our spouse, the better they know us, the stronger our friendship can be. The more you know, and the more your spouse feels known, increases the strength of comfort you have with each other, and therefore increases the enjoyment you have of being with each other. Fondness and admiration, the second building block, stems from a fundamental sense that the other is worthy of being respected, honored, and liked. Respected for the things you've learned and the things you know, honored for the way you run your household, liked for different traits in each other. The emotional bank account is a little bit more complicated. There is something called bids that we do within relationships. Bids for affection and bids for attention. An example of this would be if you're sitting in the room, if you're sitting in the kitchen and you are, let's say, cutting up some vegetables, and your husband is in the other room learning a sefer, and he says, oh, this is something so interesting that I'm reading. So if you accept it, as small as just saying, oh, okay, or even more so saying, really, could you tell me more about that? Or if you're busy, maybe in a few minutes I want to hear it. That's accepting a bit, as opposed to if you ignore it, which is a non-acceptance. What happens in a marriage, you see here that I said putting money in the bank account. Okay, so when you accept bids, you are building up goodwill and you're building up a positive sense of each other, so that when there's conflict or life stress, you're going to have more to take from. Think about a regular bank account. The more money you have in savings, the more you have for that rainy day. If you don't have a lot of money in savings, then when you need to take out, then you're going to be depleting. Dom plus plus is a phrase I use with most of my couples, and it takes an idea from Dr. Gottman's work and it speaks to our community. Dom plus plus, so we know giving someone the benefit of the doubt. Well, in a marriage, when you have more money in the bank, when you have more positive feeling, this is something labeled positive sentiment override. So this is where, I'm going to give you an example of your husband coming home at night, work was very stressful, he comes home, there is positive sentiment overriding marriage, you have a lot of money in your bank account, you just assume something happens at work when he's short with you. You go on, you take care of the kids, you do the evening, maybe later on he even comes to you and tells you what was going on. Everything goes as it should. Negative sentiment override when there isn't any money in that bank. What happens is he comes home after a really stressful day at work. He's short with you. Your first thought is, oh, there he goes again. You get upset with him. You then are very tense with him. He's then more annoyed because doesn't she realize I just had a stressful day at work? The whole evening is gone. So that is the importance of having money in the bank account. These 3 things, as I said before, build a strong marital foundation. If you have a strong foundation based in friendship and mutual admiration, this will create less fear and discomfort when there are arguments. This is true for you and for your children. Children see many of their times see their parents argue, and they're afraid. What does this mean to their marriage? What does this mean? Are they upset with each other? The children have friends where they don't want to talk to after they've had a fight. So if they know that in general, that their parents' marriage is strong, they're going to be less afraid. If their parents' marriage is not as strong, they're going to have more fear when that happens. Excuse me. In this piece, we can speak to two different types of relationships and how it affects children, right? There's the emotionally intelligent relationship. That's the relationship in which each member can understand, honor, and respect the other. And in those relationships, they lend themselves to modeling for emotionally intelligent children, which then is a predictor of a child's success later on in life. On the other hand, poor relationships, those that are disconnected or contentious, they lend themselves to children having problems with truancy, behavior problems, depression, peer rejection, and such. Please keep in mind that stronger marriages are associated with stronger, healthier immune systems and longer life. So hopefully, as you're working on strengthening your marriage, you will also be looking forward to an enjoyable long life with your spouse. Styles of communication. Some people like to fight. Some people like to talk it out and compromise. And you may be surprised to hear some people even like to yell. That is actually okay. What is important in communication styles in a marriage is how you communicate in terms of the couple's comfort with each other. It's not the how, whether you fight or you just, ignore each other, wait for the argument to kind of calm down and then come back to it. It's that it works for both of you. There are 4 styles of communication that we all use, so when you hear them, please don't get worried that you use them and it's a problem. We all use them, it's about the extent to which we use them. These 4 that I'm going to explain to you shortly have been shown to be predictors for marital dissatisfaction and divorce. This is criticism, defensiveness, which is actually a way of blaming the other, saying, it's not my fault, it's yours. Contempt, which in speaking is sort of seen as a disgust, when you use words that would be defined as disgust. And stonewalling, simply put, which is ignoring your spouse. Now that we have defined and reviewed the basis for respectful communication, I want to talk about how to make that happen. Dr. Gottman divides problems into 2 types, perpetual and solvable. Perpetual problems are those problems that, those problems that when you are having a discussion about them create feelings of rejection. There's an increase in frustration when you're discussing it. There's a feeling of not making headway, of being gridlocked and stuck. Now, 69% of all marital conflicts are considered to be perpetual problems. These are problems such as discussions about housework, finances, in-laws, and children. I'm going to stop here for a second and say that I'm actually not going to be focusing on perpetual problems, and you may be thinking, why not? If 69% of the problems are perpetual, why wouldn't you focus on them? And the reason is that truly is a presentation in itself. There are skills and strategies that you could learn, but I really want to have you go away this evening with something you can take home tonight and be able to use it as soon as necessary. So I'm going to keep that off to the side and maybe in a future presentation. So I'm going to go to define solvable problems. Those are situational issues that do not reverberate into other areas of your life. They can turn into perpetual issues if they're not taken care of, but there's something like, should my son go to camp this summer, and then having a discussion about that. Marriages can thrive even if you don't solve all your major problems. What you need is to be able to develop strategies and routines to deal with them and cope with them. I'm going to take you through 5 steps to work through a solvable problem. Please accept that most often you, as the woman, will be the one to start up these touchy subjects, difficult conversations. It's not just what I've seen in my work, but it's also been shown in the research that it's usually the woman, and I'm sure you're not surprised by this, it's usually the woman that's going to bring up these difficult topics and try to bring it up in the right way. So there's soft and startup. Soft and startup is a strategy I'm going to go into detail in a moment. It's the way you start the conversation. There's effective repair attempts. How, if the conversation is starting to go negative, how do you bring it back so that it goes the right way again and it doesn't turn into an argument? There's monitoring flooding signs. Flooding is defined by when your heart rate goes above 100 beats per minute. We are unable to physiologically process information. Our brains can't get it. So when your husband say, "I didn't hear you," in this instance, I would say believe him, he really didn't hear you. And there's learning compromise, which is as it sounds, different strategies of how to work through the issue. And then this is also really important, to have an increased tolerance in the imperfection of others. I often tell my couples, you're not perfect and neither is he. And it's a very important point to keep in mind. As I mentioned, I'm going to give you details of soft and startup, and if you end up using the role play for this part of the presentation, you will be using this strategy. The reason I'm using this is because the first 3 minutes of a discussion determine how that discussion will go. So if you start it right, it's much more likely to go well. First, complain without blaming. Okay? Let me give you an example. Your son was being difficult and acting out. You decided he was overtired and you put him to sleep early. Your husband walks in, he sees your son. Your son says, "Tati, can I come out?" He says, "Of course, it's not your bedtime yet. Come on out." Imagine, close your eyes, and imagine how the rest of that night went. So now, what do we have? We have a discussion we want to have about how we would like it to go the next time. How we'd like to go so that this didn't happen again. So complain without blaming. Tell your husband what it is that happened that was upsetting to you without blaming him. He didn't really know that he was doing anything wrong. I statements. This may sound subtly different, but saying, "I had put him to bed and I had a really difficult time when you came home and he told him he could come out," as opposed to, "You came home, you told him he could come out, you don't ever listen." There's a difference in it, even without the difference in the tone of voice. Describe what is happening and don't judge. Okay, describe the situation. Talk clearly about what you need in positive terms. Don't use negative terms. Talk about what you need. I need you to come and find me before you go and tell the children something when you come home at the end of the day. Last, be polite and appreciative. Polite sounds easy, but please and thank you are really important. And appreciative. If something has happened in the past that you can say, "I appreciate," use that. "I appreciate that last week you came, when he asked you for a candy, you came and said, 'Let me ask Mommy first because I don't know, did you ask Mommy already?' And it stopped him from playing us on both sides." There's an additional piece to healthy communication with your spouse that I want to address tonight. It's important to find a way to present a unified front as a parenting unit to your children, even when you disagree. A way to accomplish that is by learning to handle the disagreement, and I want to review 2 concepts. The first is accepting influence. Find those parts of your spouse's position that you can understand and agree with. Okay? Learn to accept your partner's point of view. He has something right to say, and it's his way of seeing it, and try to understand something. In order to do that, you need to first accept yourself as a person. If you can't accept that what your point of view is and be confident in it, you're not going to be able to listen to his. And the last is yield to win. That means in order to get your partner to say yes, first you need to yield to those parts of his point of view and argument you agree with and that seem reasonable. You don't have to agree with and change your entire point of view, but it has to be reasonable to you. Then you can use that. Then this becomes an issue that you're both working on. The last. Sure. Yield to win is in order to get your spouse to say yes, to try to understand your point of view, you want to say what about his point of view and argument is reasonable that I can understand. It's, again, taking a step back and saying, there's another position here, let me see if there's a piece of this that I can be okay with.
Just to reflect it, even if you don't agree.
The point is actually more to try to agree, that there should be some piece that you can agree with. Maybe you don't agree with him, I don't know if I have time for this, but maybe you don't agree with him with his piece of, okay, I, let Yankee come out because he was at his bedtime and, you should have come to me and told me and get upset with you, but you might agree with, I walked in the door and I didn't know and I didn't mean to get into a fight with you and I didn't mean to undermine you. And maybe you could agree with that, but it wasn't intentional. Then the last strategy I want to mention before I hand over the mic is that there's a strategy called aftermath of a fight. Once you've had a fight, how do you try to work on preparing it for the next time? So in this strategy, each spouse is going to take turns discussing these 5 steps. The first you're going to discuss is, you're going to discuss your feelings of the situation, how you felt about what happened. And it's not I feel that, because that's not really a feeling, but I feel frustrated, angry, sad. All those are feelings. Subjective reality of the incident. What is the subjective reality? Think of it as a tree. I'm standing on one side, my husband's standing on the other. The flowers I see on the left, he sees on the right. The bark that he sees broken, I see as intact. Neither of us is wrong, we're both right, it's a different perspective. Then there's taking responsibility for your own role that contributed to the fight. Did you make an assumption at the beginning of the discussion and then it made him even more angry and then he did something wrong in the communication and it spiraled? Sharing possible triggers. I've been tired, I've been stressed out, I had a bad conversation with my mother beforehand. Things outside of the actual argument that might have contributed to it. And last, making a constructive plan to deal with the next issue. Saying what you would try to do differently next time and what you would like him to do differently. Again, he'll be doing the same. As we all know, children learn by example. So if you and your husband are able to communicate in a respectful way to each other, following some of the skills and suggestions that I just spoke of, then you're giving your children the best chance to communicate respectfully with you and others around them as well. Thank you.